John LiCausi here from InternetMarketingExperience.com along with Tom Graceffa of CoyleKiley. So Tom, we're friends. CoyleKiley is also a client of mine. We're in the Rockford Cosmopolitan Club together. Shout out to our buddies in the Cosmo Club. So the reason why I'm here today with you is because when I had sent out the email to my current clients about how to protect your business website from Iran, you replied and said, well, what about a cyber liability policy? And I thought that was rather interesting. I don't know much about that. So Tom, what is a cyber liability insurance policy?
So cyber liability policy, it's a recent development in the insurance world, been in existence for about a decade, but has really developed itself over the past 4 or 5 years as the world has changed and the various types of attacks are common. So cyber liability policy is designed to pick up things that aren't covered in your typical general liability. So anything from data breach to fraud to ransomware, viruses of all kinds, etc. So it's a broad spectrum line of coverage to protect against events that occur originating from cyberspace.
So, we hear IT companies, especially local ones, talk a lot about, hey, attend this seminar, learn about cyber liability, update this, update that, it'll protect your mainframe, all from like an IT perspective.
Right.
As you know, I've got a web development company, an online marketing company. And you don't hear web developers talking about it in the same way the IT departments do. So my question to you is how does this relate to web?
So by having a web presence, you're putting yourself out in cyberspace. People can access your website and you're vulnerable to attacks. So first line of defense is always choosing a great web developer to instill the safeguards that can prevent these things from happening. But as we know, things develop, things change, there is a risk there. So a cyber liability policy would be a good backup to your front line of defense, which would be a developer like yourself, putting the safeguards in place to protect that website.
And I'm the first one to say that even with the precautions that we take as a web development company by updating plugins, updating the platform, things can still happen that are outside of our control. Hackers are getting better and better out there. So Tom, let's do a hypothetical here. So let's say I've got a client that's a local business client, and let's say something happens that's outside of our control and they get hacked. What happens? Like let's say they don't actually store any customer data on their website, but they still get hacked.
Sure.
And they have a cyber liability insurance policy with, say, CoyleKiley. What would happen?
So say, for example, the website's hacked, it's taken control of by a third party that's malicious attempt to either defame you or they're just doing it for fun, which happens.
Yes.
That website's locked down. If you have a cyber liability policy in place, a robust one, which is what I would always recommend, you would have a forensic IT team that would respond, whether in person if needed, via phone, via chat, etc., to figure out what happened, how to get your data back if possible, and how to prevent that from happening again. And it takes the burden of you having to scramble to figure out what happened. You have a hotline, essentially, to call to get that response team working for you.
Sure, absolutely. So that definitely helps from a customer's perspective. I mean, to my fellow web developers out there, if you don't want a forensic team but coming to your doorstep to figure out what you're doing wrong, make sure you're taking every precaution possible.
Right.
Am I right?
And that's the first line, again, is always trust your guys, ask the right questions, make sure they're protecting you, because the best case scenario is never to have to deal with this. So if the forefront of technology is kept up with by your web developer, the chances are slimmer. There's always a chance. Hackers are getting smarter day by day, and unfortunately, they tend to be one step ahead of the government, the IT, standard operating protocols. So it's
by the time Homeland Security releases the memo that something's hackable, there's already people being hacked.
So it's a term that comes up frequently in cyber liability if it's named malware. So named means they know about it and they know how to fix it. But unnamed malware is what causes the problems mostly, because that's what gets through your virus protection, your, however you would code that into a website. As you're the expert, you probably would know how to prevent that. But day by day, there's new threats developing, and staying current with your website technology and having that safeguard cyber liability policy gives you that peace of mind that, God forbid something does happen, you have a resource that you can call on.
We actually have all of our clients' websites tied into like a mainframe system that actually tracks what plugins and what revisions of the CMS systems we're using for each website.
Cool.
And it will let us know and notify us if a plugin, like a plugin revision that we're using for any given website, has a known hack.
Okay.
So we can then go to that particular plugin and update it immediately. I mean, that's
In almost real time, you're notified of...
Almost real time,
That's
exactly. So that's one example of how we are ultra proactive with it.
Perfect.
Now, let's say hypothetically, the customer's website that got hacked actually does have customer data on it.
Sure.
How is that different than the website that doesn't have data?
So that's a big part of the risk of a cyber attack. So if there's a data breach that occurs, so say there's some remote data, cloud data, anything that's tied to your website, or if you use your website to process credit card payments or collect that data that ends up somewhere else, they can filter that and retrieve your customers, your vendors' information. A data breach is considered a release of 2 or more identifying records. So that would be name and phone number and address, any combination of those things. By law, if a breach is thought to have occurred, you need to notify the potential affected parties, and you also have to provide credit monitoring service. Those costs add up pretty quick. And a part of a good cyber liability policy is coverage for data breach. So the same coupled support from the forensic IT team would be available, but also funds to start that notification process by phone and mail and pay for that credit monitoring service for at least a year. And the government changes these regulations, but it is mandatory to do that.
Got it. So from a legal perspective too, these cyber liability insurance policies also provide some legal assistance as well as the forensic support.
They do. So in the traditional sense of a general liability policy, it would provide your defense and support to work through issues. On the cyber liability policy, almost the same, where legal support is included. And we can do a couple different ways of how that limit would respond, whether it's outside the general limit or inside, but legal support and a attorney team is there to work on your behalf to work through these issues that arise after the fact of an attack or a breach.
Interesting. So they have these cyber liability insurance policies available for pretty much any commercial-based business.
They do, and it's a common misconception that if you're a small business, maybe you only have 1 employee or 4 clients, everybody is at risk. A famous story is the Target breach. Do you remember that, when the red cards got... So that was actually as a result of a small mom and pop HVAC contractor working at a Target location. They were using a device to program the rooftop units that needed to be connected to the network. They connected to Target's local intranet, which was also connected to the internet. Somebody had maliciously already sideloaded a virus onto the device they're using. This contractor had no idea,
And then they put that device on the network.
Went up and ended up with a total breach of all Target's cardholders and put him out of business. And that's a gigantic breach.
Sure.
And Target incurred a ton of costs, and that's a prime example of a very small company being involved with a gigantic issue that occurred from something they were unaware of. And a lot of the breaches actually happen internally, unknowingly. So it's clicking on the bad links or, opening the email you shouldn't, opening that attachment that looked funny, but you opened it anyway. A lot of the ransomware occurs that way. So it's first-party coverage is picked up on this. It's not just for third-party hackers that may be causing these events.
Interesting stuff.
Scary stuff.
Very scary, very interesting, both at the same time.
Right. And it's as these policies develop, as I mentioned, over the past 5 years or so, even every 6 months, you look at the carrier's offerings, they've added and added and added coverage parts as they experience these issues. Recently, funds transfer fraud has been a huge issue with people sending fraudulent wire transfer requests through the internet. And if you don't have the good checks and balances in place to make that phone call and say, did you initiate this request, and you just pay it, a lot of times that money is gone. So if that occurs, we can actually pick that back up on the cyber liability. Even if it's a mistake, we can get you reimbursed.
Wow. That's good. So, Tom, if somebody was interested in one of these policies, could they give you a call to discuss?
Certainly. Always happy to answer questions. And I like talking about this. We also have a lot of specialists that I learn from daily. So we do have the resources to help you understand what your risk may be.
Mm-hmm.
And if you'd like to move forward, we can get a good policy in place for you.
All right. Tom Graceffa, CoyleKiley Insurance. Thanks so much, Tom.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you.